This is my new shop. I think it might be haunted because there's a ghost in here. And there it is. It's a Predator Ghost go-kart racing engine. I've got a new project. I'm on a new journey. I'm building a Cyclekart. There's the frame. The shop's very cool. I've got all my tools and equipment up here from Spearfish. It's a little crowded right now, but I'm thinning things out. My anvil and my generator. This will power a welder. But yeah, I'm really liking it. I have a working shop again. Now it's time to get to work. I've discovered Cyclekarts, and now I have to build one. Cyclekarts are a concept from the Stevenson brothers, who make plans for boats and all kinds of things, pedal cars. They came up with the Cyclekart. Is actually the brainchild of Peter Stevenson in the 90s. And what it is, basically, it's a big go-kart with dirt bike wheels and tires, and a hopped up lawnmower engine, and a body based on an early race car from before World War II. And I've chosen the Stutz Bearcat because I just always loved Stutz Bearcats. And now I'm building one. A little one. The Stutz Bearcat is my car of 1913. And I just love these things. See how close I can come to it. There's the Ghost motor unboxed. And I've got my transmission. This is a jug averter. It's a torque converter, basically a vari-drive unit, and I got a Juggernaut driver clutch, which my research shows is the best. And I've got my Peerless differential, and I got some more hardware. That's my engine mount plate. I've got 4 of these axle bearings. That'll go on there, 2 on the ends of the frame, and 2 in the middle to support the differential. And I've got a bunch more parts here, and I've got more parts coming. But making pretty good progress. There's the tools I'm using. There's a cutoff wheel there on a not very expensive Harbor Freight angle grinder, and then I got my grinder for shaping on my old Milwaukee, and I've got my drill press and my grinder set up, my portable workbench, and I'm getting my frame laid out. Notch this end piece is going to be 22 inches wide at the very back. The rails are 95 inches long, 1 inch less than 8 foot. And the forward cross member will be 14 inches back, and it's 15.5 inches. This is 1 inch by 3 inch square tubing, so the width at this cross member will be 17.5 inches. And I have to shape the front of these rails, and I have to drill some holes. I'm going to drill a hole up here for a cross tube in the very front, and back here I've got to drill the holes for the axle bearings. Had this really cool piece of stainless steel tubing left over from my days in the bow yard. That's going to be bolted through with a piece of 1/2" all thread in there. And that'll tighten the frame up, pull everything, hold everything together, and then my spring mounts are going to go on up here. And I've got those laid out here. 1/8 spacers. And then I've got the 3 by 1 1/4, 3/16 by 1 1/4 spring hangers. Waiting for my springs. I got a big shipment of stuff coming from Renegade Cyclekarts, my front end, and springs, and a bunch more parts. This is how the front's going to be shaped. I'll be coming back 9.5 inches. Body will start 11 inches back, so 9.5 inches will give me 1.5 inches from where this ends to where the body starts. And that bolt in front too will be going through right there. So now I got some holes to drill. It's easier to prepare these rails before they're put together. I can lay them out on the drill press and drill the holes and cut them and weld up the front. So that'll be all ready to go with the spring hangers and everything on it when I weld the cross members in. There'll be 2 more cross members back here with the engine plate, and in between those will be where the axle bearings go. This is my plan that I've drawn based on a Stutz Bearcat, 1913. That's my frame plan. I looked at all kind of frame plans on YouTube. A lot of really good builders building some really nice Cyclekarts. And I took what I liked from all of them and designed this. I've just always been fascinated with the Stutz Bearcat. I just thought they were just the coolest cars that were ever made. And it's easy to sit on top of them, but this one you won't, because the one thing I can't scale down is me. So my feet will go up forward, and what would have been the engine compartment on the Stutz, and I'll be sitting there with my butt close to the ground, and the engine will be at the back. Drive through a chain to a big sprocket on the axle, on the differential actually. Okay, I center punched and center drilled the hole for that forward cross bolt, and establish the front, and which is the right and the left rail. The arrow points forward and the other arrow points to the inside, because these have a top and a bottom. This is where they're welded, and that's on. I want that on the bottom. The top is nice and smooth, and that's hard to drill through. I will be having to drill through it, but it's hard to keep a drill from wandering. And then back here I've laid out where I want my bearing mounts to go. 16 3/8, and then between the bolt holes is 3 inches. And I use a center drill, a center punch, because it doesn't wander so much. And now when I put it in the drill press and drill through there, it should go as straight as possible. Well, I marked where I want that 1/2 inch hole from using my template for the front of my frame. And I just work this out kind of by eye. Came down 1 inch, 2 inches here, 1 inch from there, and then a line angle from where it ends up here. And then you got this angle just by eye, what looked right. I tried different angles and I like this the best. Turned out to be 65 degrees. And then I used just a round, just rounded that off. I used something, I think it was a 6-inch diameter piece of stuff to mark that. And these will be my spring hangers. And then down here there'll be a hole to mount the front eye of the leaf spring. And then I've got some 1/8 inch material, because this is 1 inch and the springs will be 1 1/4. So I've got some 1/8 inch thick material. I'll make little spacers to go in here and drill everything and bolt everything through and then weld it all up. I'm setting the frame pieces up in the drill press now. I'm going to drill these 2 outer holes 5/16 all the way through, and the middle one with a 1/4 inch all the way through as a pilot for the hole saw. Well, this is slow going with this hole saw. Trying to get through that middle. I've got a 2 1/8 hole saw on here to get clearance for the axle bearing housing. I've drilled the front holes with 5/16. Then I'll use my step drill to take that out to 1/2 inch. The hole saw was having a really rough time getting through there, so got almost through. Then I just cut it with my cut-off wheel there. Just busting them out there. I'll grind it. Got a drill with a grind wheel in it. I'm just grinding it all out. There's going to be a big plate welded over that anyway. I've got some parts from Renegade Cyclekarts, and boy are they nice. This is a spindle, a kingpin, axle. This is the rear spring shackles, springs with the mounts, mounting hardware, and my steering rod. These are the tie rods. Heim joint ends. Where the tie rods connect. The steering wheel hub. Some spacers. This is the front mount that mounts the front of the shaft. This didn't come from Renegade, but that's the brake for my disc brakes. And this is another one I intend to use for a parking brake. That's the spacer for the sprocket on the Peerless differential. It spaces the sprocket out so that you can mount the engine on center line. These are my support for the intermediate support bearings for the Peerless differential, and I've got a 13-inch steering wheel blank. So now I gotta get to work. Now I got some parts. I got stuff to work with. So right now I'm making my spacers. I got spacers to go in here so these bolts can tighten up without crushing the hollow frame rail. I got 4 of those have to go in there, and then I got 2 up here for that cross bolt. I need those out of 1/2 inch pipe. They'll go in here so I can tighten down on that bolt without crushing the frame rail. I've got the anti-crush sleeves. Well, they're just tacked in there. They just have to be in place when the bolt goes through. And I got the ones for the cross bolt in the front tacked in. Now I'm slitting these. Come down 3/16 of an inch. Use my 3/16 thick metal as a spacer, and cutting back to 9.5 inches. Both sides. I'm going to draw out the curve for the front, and this will be bent down and welded along that curve. Came back 3/16 there and go down 3/16 off of that top piece. Now I'm marking for the curve. This will come down and weld to here. So I got this nice curve radius here, but I'm going to stop this here because this is where the spring mount will set. And from here down to here, I'm going to forge a piece of this 3/16 fit on that curve. It's 1.25 inches wide, so it'll hang out 1/8 of an inch outside the frame. And I've got 1/8 inch spacers to go in here, but then this will weld on the outside of everything. That could make a really strong forward spring mount. So now I got to cut to this line with my cutoff wheel. I've got the front of my frames cut, and I'll pull this down and weld it along there. And then I'm going to forge a piece of 3/16 by 1.25 to go across here. And the spring mounts will go on the side of that and weld along the top there and down the frame and then across the bottom. It's much easier to drill these pieces before they're welded in, so I drill the holes for this piece, which anchors the front of the steering shaft. It's got these expanding nuts that go through a hole there, and then when you tighten them up they expand down here and it locks them into place. But this measures 348 from the calipers, and the only drill I have is 343, so I just got to use a rat tail file and file those out till these just slip in there, and I can expand them and lock them in place. Got some welding done. This is the front of the frames. Not real pretty, but they're burned in pretty good. I burnt through a couple of times. Just had to dial my heat down a little bit. Yeah, and I got these frame reinforcements for the axle bearing carriers. I expected some warpage, but each one warped about 3/8 of an inch, but it's even and consistent. So if I was going to do it again, I would probably clamp these together inboard sides and then go from one weld on one side and one weld on the other and let them cool and then get back, and it'd probably still warp, but probably wouldn't be this bad. This is the front of the frames after grinding. Cleaned up pretty nice. And he used a lot of metal and burned it in pretty good. I can use a grinder, not a JB weld, so I make them pretty as I want. And my first thought when I saw this was, I guess I used enough heat. Well, the heating took the bends out nicely, so I have straight frame now. I'm making my spring mounts. I've got a line across here, 65 degrees. These are the spacers, 1/8 inch. Space it out to 1.25 wide there, and these are the mounts that'll go on over them. So I'm marking these inner spacers. I got them on here at the right angle, and I'm marking them across here and around here. And I've got these marked. I'm using the old boat method where left is port, 1 mark, starboard is 2 syllables, 2 marks, so I've got 1 mark. This one means it's outboard, port. Goes from port to starboard. This is the number 1 mark here. And then I marked where the bottom of the frame is, and then I'm going to drill the hole for the spring mount from there. And the other side is 2 marks. Inboard side on the starboard is 3 marks, outboard side is 4 marks. They should all be the same, but actual reality, sometimes there are variations. So I make the part to fit where it goes. Well, I've welded the curved pieces on the front. It's quite a challenge welding the OA3 to the 3/16. She stuck on there, burnt through a few times. Now I gotta grind the weld smooth, and then I can put the spacers and the front spring hangers on. And grinding the welds. Now I gotta fit these spacers, 1/8 spacers. Take everything out to 1.25 inches wide, which is what the springs are. And then the spring mounts will go on over these. The 1/8 inch thick spacers are welded on now. I'm going to grind all this smooth and then weld on the spring hangers. I got these ground smooth. I got the spring sitting on here. Make sure my line with the frame is right. Got my angle set as close to the 65 degrees as I can get it. So I'm ready to weld them up. I'll tack them together first and then get the spring out of there, and then I'll weld it up. The spring hangers are welded on. And now I got some grinding to do. The spring hangers are all welded on and ground. Just kind of smoothing this grinding up off the edges. Smoothing it up with the file. And the originals, they were either forgings and some of them were castings, so that's what I want to try to get it to look like. Now I need to mark the hole for the spring shackles for these little guys. So I'm locating the center. And I just got to make sure that when this is all the way up, when it's all the way out, it's 26 inches long when it's stretched all the way out, to make sure that this doesn't hit the frame. So I'm going to come forward with it a little bit, but not too far. I don't want it straight up and down, I want it to head a little bit, so actually that looks pretty good. That's 26 1/4, that's probably far enough. Well, 26 1/8, that's not quite far enough. 3/8. 3/8 ahead of center. So I went with 7/16 ahead of center and 5/8 from the bottom edge. I'll drill my hole. What I'm going to do, most of carts I've seen being built just have a 5/16 bolt going through the shackle and through the frame. The only problem I have with that is the frame's only 83 thousandths thick each side. There's no way to get much grease that'll stay in there, and I think with the constant pounding and working these things are going to get, eventually it's going to elongate that hole and it's going to get loose. I hate things that get loose. I don't like things that break. I don't like things that get loose. So what I've got, found a piece of tubing. I tried to get up to tubing to fit 5/16 is the bolts that they're using, but they were all too loose. They didn't fit very good, but I did find a piece of 3/8 that fits real nice. And it's 5/8 outside diameter. What I'm going to do is drill a hole through here, 5/8, and then I'm going to weld that in. And I can put grease in there, and I should never have to worry about it. Yeah, that's what I wanted. That'll work out just fine. I'll weld these in before I weld the frame together. I'm getting ready to weld up my frame. Put it out here. I'm just squaring up the form, the siding down, 2x4s, getting as even as I can. Once he's all tacked up, it won't be going anywhere. So this is the most important. I've got it on the form. I'm going to clamp it up and start welding. I'm ready to tack this thing up. All my center lines are lined up. Got everything square as best I can. Back here I have my axle in place, spins free. I got the ends bolted in. The bearings, the intermediates set in place. Got them marked where they go. Got them squared up as best I can. I've got a line drawn on the form where they line up to. So, I guess I'm ready to build a frame. The frame's all welded up now. I've got the welds ground. Smooth them up a bit. The final piece of the welding puzzle are the mounts for the brake calipers. So I have to line everything up. Alignment is very important on these things. Everything has to line up. So I have to put the brake disc, main brake disc, goes on the right side of the differential, and the drive sprocket goes on the other side with this spacer to put the drive sprocket in line with the engine driver sprocket. So these bolts have to come out. So I had to make longer bolts. So I got some bolts here that are 4.5 inches long, because they have to go through here and hold the disc on, and that spacer, and then the spacer bolts on to the housing, and the sprocket bolts on to the spacer. So all these bolts have to come out, and it's a 5/16 thread. The last 1/2 inch of the housing is threaded, so these thread into the housing, then they have a locking nut on the back. The problem is when you take all these bolts out, there's 4 bolts, when you take that out, this will come apart and your gears will fall out and everything. So a real good tip I got from a YouTube video is to duct tape this together before pulling these out. And it was a good bit of advice, and that's what I'm going to do. Since that housing is aluminum and these are steel threads going into it, I slathered them up with Never Seize, anti-seize. Use a lot of this in the bow yard, so now I'm ready to put that on there. The brake disc is on here. Washers. I'm using the washers that came off the old bolts. Important to start them with fingers. Make sure they're not cross-threaded. Cross-thread and aluminum, you destroy your thread. Going to snug these up. You can't over tighten these, you'll strip out that aluminum. They got to be snug enough not to come loose, but with the lock nuts on the other end, I don't think they'll be going anywhere. Tape can come off now. That housing's not going anywhere. This one gets a washer. And a lock nut. I can draw these down pretty tight because they're through bolted. Then the sprocket goes on with these bolts, and I will use Never Seize because this is aluminum. I've got my axle back in. The bearings are bolted in, and I've got it centered. I've got a locking collar on either side. This is going to be the disc for the emergency parking brake, and this is the main disc. And I've got this caliper. It's the ATV caliper. Got this off of Amazon. And I can see right away that I'm going to have to trim this bracket down some. This is a bracket from Renegade Cyclekarts, and it's made big so you can fit it to your frame, whichever frame you make. And I'm going to bolt it through to a tab welded onto the frame so I can unbolt it, because it makes it a lot easier to work with these, because this bolt there threads into the bracket, and this one just rides on there, but this can ride back and forth so that it can center itself as it wears. So, and it's really hard if you weld it straight to the frame, because you have to unscrew this bolt there. So I'm going to make a bracket for it. So right now I can see I'm going to have to take about a 1/2 inch off the back of this, because I'm going to weld a piece of 1/4 inch there and drill holes and bolt this through. Now this one, my parking brake, it's a mechanical brake. This is the caliper for it, and it rides this thing here, this bracket. So what I need to find out here, it's going to go about there. Make a bracket weld on here. So this needs to be about 3/4 of an inch out. 5/8. Yeah, 5/8. And it has to be out far enough. I'll make a mark along here. That'll work. Now I'll drill this to match the holes. And that will bolt, so this will unbolt. The other alignment issue we have to verify is that the driving sprocket is going to line up with the driven sprocket. So I have to put my torque converter on. This is the Jugaverter. Got the Juggernaut forward clutch from Go Power Sports. You can see there's a lot of different configurations you can put it on. I want to keep this as low as possible, so I'm just going to run it straight out towards the front of the car. I have a 1-inch spacer block to go into the engine, so I'm going to put this on. I've got my Never Sees on here. I'm going to line this up with the ones that give me the straight shot back, so it looks like this one's right here. You gotta be careful not to cross thread these. It is an aluminum, that's why I'm using the Never Sees. Start with fingers only. Make sure you don't cross thread it. Just snug, but not over tightened, because you can't strip those threads right out of that aluminum. When I'm running, I'll check it every once in a while, make sure nothing's coming loose. There, aluminum tight. Now I set the engine in place. Set my mount bolts and my spacer block so I can see how that sprocket's going to line up. Here's my motor block. It's 2 pieces of 1/2 inch plywood with a piece of 1/8 inch rubber glued in between with contact cement. That'll kind of help with some of the high frequency vibrations that these little engines do. I'll get some bolts started in there and I'll check my alignment. Well, I got a misalignment here. this sprocket needs to align with that sprocket. It's actually off about 3/8 of an inch. And I could move that sprocket in a little bit by grinding some off. Or, in retrospect, I should have waited to weld the motor mount plate on until after all this was in. But I've got a problem with leaves falling out here, and I tried to get all that welding done before the ground got covered with dry leaves, and I just got ahead of myself. So I have to correct it. So what I can do, I could widen the slots and move the motor over, but I don't really want to do that. I got the axle centered, so I don't really want to shift it. And since this thing is spaced out already and I got room here, so I'm going to make a spacer. I'm going to get some 3/8 aluminum, because I can turn these bolts around and run the heads on the inside and get plenty of room there. I got a lot of room there. So that's what I'm going to do. I want to keep things centered if I can, so I'm going to get some 3/8 aluminum and make me a spacer on here. I've got longer bolts for here, and I think that'll work out well. But in the meantime, I can put my caliper here on. Once the caliper's on, then this has to go right there. But right now it's centered. Everything's perfectly centered, and I can put this caliper on. The last welding I have to do is the mount for these calipers. And I hope I get a window to get that done, so I can get this frame primed and painted before snow flies. Because then I can actually get it up on wheels. So now I've got to find some 3/8 aluminum plate and make me a spacer. Well, I got my mounting bracket. I got it drilled and bolted up to the caliper bracket. It's going to go in here. So I'm going to hold it in place so it doesn't bottom out on the disc, and then I'm going to tack weld that bracket to the frame. Then I'll take everything out of here and I'll weld it up good. And this one here, handbrake, get it off the caliper a little bit, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to tack weld the bracket, and then I'll pull everything out and take it out and weld it up good. And that should be the last bit of welding. Then I'm ready to prep the frame and prime and paint it, and it'll be ready for winter. I can actually put the front end together. Well, I can't put this together yet because I have to make that spacer. So that'll be the next thing to do after it's all welded up. But then, you know, during the winter, I can start putting stuff together. When it's too cold to prime and paint, I just want to get everything primed and painted before snow flies. Depending how long it takes to get the material for that spacer, and maybe I'll get it up on wheels. Now I noticed that welding these bushings in kind of melted the edges of them. And thinking of the way these things work, these shackles, they're free to rotate 4 1/2 as the spring increases. But the side loads, a lot of side loads on these when cornering, and what it's going to try to do is work. So it needs this surface area to keep it from doing that, to keep it from trying to work on there that way. So what I thought I could do is build it up around there with JB weld, but that would probably end up breaking away and falling out. So what I decided to do is, the welds burned in really good, I'm going to grind these down flush with the frame and then make some 1/8 inch spacers the same diameter as this, which is about 1 inch. I have some 1 inch, 1/8 inch. A little grease on them, and that'll hold this in alignment really well without it working. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to Bondo in some of the welds just to make it nice and smooth, because rough edges and corners tend to collect dirt and stuff. And a little bit of Bondo will smooth those right up, and I can sand everything down and then prime it and paint it, hopefully before winter sets in. Well, it's mid-October now. Got a little bit of a warm up. Some of the last warm days. So I'm priming and painting. Got 2 coats of primer on everything. Rust-Oleum, gray primer. So in about 15 minutes I'm going to start putting the black on. See if I can get everything black by the end of the day. Tomorrow's going to be warm, but the wind's going to blow out of the northwest. Today it's out of the south. If it blows from the northwest, it's going to be coming from there. It's going to blow right into the shop. So this was my painting day. I had one day. I'm getting her done. Everything is gloss black now. I'm happy. Painting's done. So if it gets cold now, it won't bother me. And I can start assembling. This is my sprocket spacer I'm making. 3/8 aluminum. Tried going through with the hole saw, I just didn't want to do it, just loading up and bogging down. So I just drilled a bunch of holes. I'm going to use my jeweler's saw, cut that out, and smooth it up with the Dremel tool and files, and then I can clamp it up to my sprocket and run the drill through there. Then I can round it off, and I'll have my spacer so my sprocket will line up. I got a good marking from the hole saw, so I just got to cut the center out and then file it and use the Dremel on it and get it out to that line, so it'll go over to the hub of the differential. Use the Dremel tool with a metal cutting bit in, and I'm just taking it out to the line that hole saw left, and I'm going to finish it up with the grinding drum. Good old Dremel tool. What would I do without it? Now I just have to use this sprocket as a guide for my drill, run the drills through those holes, and then cut it round to match the housing, and then I should have a spacer for my drive sprocket. I'm putting it together permanently. I've got these plates that have a cutout. It's like these plates, and I'm putting them with the cutout down, so that bridges this. And the axle is centered now, and so I'm putting these bolts in. I run into a clearance problem with these bolts. I got my 3/8 spacer there now, so what I'm going to do is I've got some grade 8 5/16 bolts that are much thinner, and I'll put them on without washers. The 3/16 inch thick plate, it doesn't really need a washer. And I've got lock nuts and washers to go on this side. And that should put my sprocket lined up with the dry sprocket on my torque converter. Now, like again, in retrospect, if I had waited to put this plate on, I could have lined everything up and I wouldn't need that spacer and I wouldn't have a clearance problem. But I kind of jumped the gun and welded it on. But so I'm making adjustments for it now. And if it has to move anywhere now, I'll just have to widen these slots. But according to my measurements before, it should line up perfectly. That we'll see. Okay, I got everything locked down, all the bolts tightened down with lock nuts. I got my bridging piece here over the gap, and I've got my clearance in there, not a lot, but enough. There's almost 1/8 of an inch. There's almost 1/8 of an inch there. And then here, there's another clearance issue in there. I ground down the end of this bolt here that sticks through so it wouldn't rub. But everything's free, no drag anywhere, and everything's centered and tightened down. So now I have these collars. These split collars are the only way to go because they tighten down on the shaft. The ones with the grub screws just kind of tear up the shaft. So this one will go on there, and they'll be tied up against these bearings, and these are very important because they keep the axle from moving sideways. You don't want any sideways movement because that'll mess up my clearances and my chain alignment and everything. So these have to be locked down tight, and I'm going to put them on now. But I'm not later. I'm going to put Loctite on them before I run it or anything. After all the final adjustments are done, I'll Loctite the screws on these. There's a lot of side loads on these things in the turns, and you just don't want anything shifting. So these collars are extremely important. This is what I was trying to achieve. This sprocket is in perfect alignment with that sprocket. That's real important, otherwise it'll throw chains. I can see it better this way. That's what I was after. I finally have it. I'm going to have to chop off some of my bracing to clear the chain. Just a little piece across there. I got a chain on the way. And it's easier to put the chain on without all the clutch assembly on, so I'm going to wait for my chain. But yeah, I'm happy with this. That's real good alignment. So then I'll be ready to put the juggernaut driver on, and the chain and the belt, and then I'll have running gear. And I'm almost ready to go up on wheels. Got to put the hubs on back here. So I'm going to start working on the front end now and get all that together and be ready to go up on wheels. Okay, I'm going to put the front end together. I got my grease gun here because I'm going to grease everything because it all has to move really free. So I'm going to start off with putting the front springs on. There's a way to do this that isn't messy. Just kind of wipe the excess grease off later. I got my springs marked. Got one notch here. That's to the front on the left side. That's because, as I mentioned before, I'm an old boat builder. And one notch is for port, two notches for starboard. So this is the port side spring going on. I got a washer on here. Let me get some grease up in that hole. That's the wrong one. This one goes in the back. Because I've got some long, extra long ones to go in the front. Because I use 3/16, I use a little thicker metal up there. Washer. And another washer. And a lock nut. Here, I want to get it just snug, not too tight. I don't want binding. Let's take the play out. Yeah, it looks pretty good. And in the back, I've got my 3/8 bolts. Go back here. I've got that sleeve in there. And two washers. Give me my spacing. So space the 1 inch out to 1.25 inches. A little grease on them too. Grease is good stuff. You can wipe off the excess. And two other washers on the inside. In these washers I have the edges darkened with the magic marker, but the ones on the inside don't need that. They won't show. Another shackle, another washer, and a lock nut. And then down here, another 5/16. And a lock nut. that should work. Tighten those things down. The same thing to the other side, and I'll be sprung in the front. I'm gonna be ready to put the axle on. She'll soon be up on wheels. Well, you have to get bolts that are long enough to go through to the nylon part of the nylocks. So I had to get them a little long. I couldn't get 2 1/4, so I got 2 1/2. Little trick I use for cutting them off so that I don't ding up the nylock. I just put a washer on it. Then I'll just file the sharp edges off. And I gotta do it back there too. There's no slot at all. It'll work real good. And that's gonna be good. Now I can put the axle on. This is the front axle for Renegade Cyclekarts. Springs are also from there. If you're building a Cyclekart, you need to get to know Mark and Julie Parnell of Renegade Cyclekarts. They make these beautiful parts, very high quality. They have a machine and welding shop, and they make very good quality parts. These are my U-bolts, and these are the bottom plates. They've got a center bolt that goes in a hole in the spring, and then these 2 nubs out here are to follow the curve of the spring so that this doesn't make a flat spot on the spring and cause stress in the spring. Very well thought out, very good quality. And so I'm going to measure and center everything up as I go. I'm going to ding the paint up a little bit, but that's okay. I can always touch it up later. I'm not going to snug these up yet. Just tight enough to hold everything in place because I have to center it. And then I have to kick it back just a little bit. These are made straight up, so to get my caster angle, this has to be angled back just a little bit. I think 5 to 7 degrees. Not a whole lot, but it has to be some. So I'll get these other nuts just started in here, these other U-bolts, and I'll get her all lined up and then I'll cinch her down. Okay, I got them centered. Best I can center them from the frame to the corner here. 5 7/16 each side. They're snug enough. I haven't snugged them up yet because I won't set my caster angle until it's on its wheels. So it's on all its wheels. Yeah, we have a front axle. I'm liking it. Well, I'm drilling and tapping my spindles for a grease fitting. Isn't absolutely necessary, but I've seen that a couple guys have done it, so I just want to be able to give it a shot of grease every once in a while. So I'm putting grease fittings in the steering spindles, or steering knuckles, whatever you want to call them. That'll go on next. Yeah, I got my parts all greased up real well. So these bushings go into here. You have to clear all of any paint or anything out of there. They won't go in. They're snug fit. And they're all good steel. I can put this in the vise and squeeze it just a little bit, make sure those are seated. These are the kingpins. They're hardened Allen screws. All these parts are. Before Renegade, everybody was using go-kart parts, but these are much heavier duty, much bigger than go-kart parts. You have to make sure you get the right on the right and the left on the left because of these angles, and you want this, you want your pitman arms to clear the frame. So yeah, I'm going to have to scrape some of the paint off of here. And I'm not going to get that overly tight either, just snug, because you want these things to work pretty free in there, because that's your steering. But boy, there's no slop in that. That's nice. I like that. I'm not really a commercial for Renegade Cyclekarts, but I could be. I just really like their stuff. When you're running a good quality stuff, it's what you want to use. Well, the nuts stop on the lid, so you can cinch these up pretty tight, and they're just perfect. And vibrate loose. That's going to be some good steering. Well, that's ready for wheels. I ordered some tubing to make my bearing spacers for the front wheels. As soon as that comes in, I'll get those spacers made and I'll be able to put front wheels on it. And I could put rear wheels on it now, but I'm going to work on the body panels. It'll be easier to work on the body panels without the wheels being in the way. So right now I'm going to work on my body panels.